Well, another day of doing nothing because of COVID-19. So, just listen to the news, watch movies. That's about it. So, anyways, without further ado, here's CBC News Network.
Host Vashi Capellas and the CBC Catherine Cullen joining me now as well.
Talking to these medical professionals is so, I am very deeply impressed by them in terms of their fearlessness in the face of all of this. But it seemed clear from that emergency room doctor in Perth that they sort of have enough for now, but what they would like to know is that there will be enough when they get to the point where they have this onslaught of cases potentially. And there was some news around personal protective equipment today too, Rashi.
Yeah, there was the Prime Minister announced that there have been about 10 million masks that have arrived in the past few days, and that they are being sort of accounted for and validated, and then they can be distributed. This question, though, of supply is such an important one right now as we head into what public health officials have been telling us, over the next few weeks could be sort of not peak, but a surge in various parts of the country. And so I think while we keep asking people we are talking to who are on the front lines, do you have enough? Do you think you're going to have enough? That second question, the follow-up about whether they think they're going to have enough, is so dependent on what happens right now, how we all observe those behaviors. And so sometimes it's difficult to assess, and it also, as I said earlier, it really does depend on which facility you're in. It also depends on which province you live in, and there are so many various accounts of it. The one thing that I would also highlight from a federal level, it sounds like that'll be a big part of the discussion with the various premiers tonight. That call is expected, I think, to take place around 5:30 Eastern between the Prime Minister and the premiers. It is a bit confusing from my perspective because the answer to whether we have enough has changed a bit over the past few days. So at first, the Prime Minister said we have all current needs covered and for the foreseeable future. Obviously, the foreseeable future, I don't know exactly what that means. But then we started hearing accounts from individual provinces, particularly Quebec, and the Premier there that said, I don't have enough. I'm worried about the next 3 to 5 days. And we've asked various ministers, well, how does that sort of match up with what you were saying? And it's because there is a difference in the way each province is sort of calculating how bad it can get and how much they're going to need. But we've also heard from nurses from the front line saying we don't have what we need in long-term care homes, for example, right? So it is difficult to figure out, from my perspective, if there is enough. Obviously, there are many efforts underway to secure more, but will more also be enough in the future? Again, that depends on how things go right now. So it's difficult to find sort of a straightforward answer to that question, but it sounds like today the Prime Minister acknowledged, and yesterday the Health Minister, that maybe the stockpile that the federal government has isn't going to be enough for provinces. And then you compound that with all the competition around the world, even south of the border, for those supplies. It's not going to be easy. Yeah, and there may not be a straightforward answer as you point out for all of those factors. I should say that Minister Anita Anand, the Minister of Procurement and Public Services, has tweeted that planned carrying goods purchased from manufacturers in China arrived safely in Toronto last night. She goes on to say this signals the arrival of some additional orders for goods needed in the fight against COVID-19. And we also imagine, Catherine, that if the cases really start to take off in one region of the country and not another, you could probably move things around. I would imagine the collaboration that the Prime Minister was talking about is also that premiers will step up if needed in certain cases. I mean, there's a chance, my colleagues with my brother and I was worried that as this goes on, provinces will be less willing to share. The Prime Minister has put the emphasis on attitude up until this point, and as well. We did get an acknowledgement yesterday from Health Minister all the stockpiles perhaps are as prepared as they might have as, and that all governments around the world are going to be taking a closer look at the situation, knowing from this as it's happening, but in the meantime, obviously, there are a lot of health concern about this. That the Prime Minister talked as well about the goal of making Canada self-sufficient when it comes to supplying this kind of protective equipment. That's important that we should not be putting a lot of money into even right now as we speak to look at other businesses, to different back in this too as well. Plans that
This is a critical week in our fight against this virus. Canadians must continue to practice physical distancing. Stay strong and stay home. Unless you are essential work, such as finish jobs, grocery store, healthcare. Canadians are resilient. We are going to get through this crisis together. We'll hear from Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Timothy Tam. We'll hear from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Champagne, Services, and the President of the Treasury Board, Jean Duclair. With us today are also Minister of Health, Pat behind you, the Chief Medical Officer of Health and Indigenous Services, Dr. Tom Wong, and Deputy Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Helen Lee. Dr. Tam, please. Good morning. So, as usual, I'll start with an update on the numbers of COVID-19 cases in Canada. There are now 10,466 cases, including 111 deaths. These represent infections from previous exposures and not what is happening right now necessarily. So even if you're not hearing of cases in your community, it doesn't mean there is no risk of exposure. We must all consider that anyone could be infected, and keeping our 2-meter distance is the safest bet. So we continue to test at a very high rate in Canada, one of the highest in the world. We test completed for over 260,000 people already. Around 3.5% of these people have been confirmed as positive, and 95% also as confirmed as negative. So we talk about these percentages. Well, what does it mean? So Canada has been maintaining around
it's just constant news on it. I don't know what to do here. I've filmed and recorded myself several times already, recording the news. I don't know what to do. The groups are just not. Let's see. Coronavirus help for renters across Canada. Young people are suspecting flu also. I was gonna go for a walk with you, but sorry I missed you. Anyways, you have a good day. I'll talk to you soon. Bye. What's on the radio?
That are working on procurement to try to increase how many masks.
So you can lean this thing up
When
against.
we come on shift, we are given one surgical mask, and we have access to one N95 should we have any patients that have aerosol generating procedures that need to be performed, and those masks would have to be reused. And at the end of the day, we are working on ways to improvise and to look at ways of recycling these masks. We are going to start collecting masks at the end of the day and trying to, like I said, recycle them, try to see if we can bake them at low temperature to kill off the virus so that we can actually reuse the mask and not run critically low. Can I just stop you there? Before something like this happened, would you ever have had to consider the idea, not just of having one mask for the shift, but having to bake it to reuse it for the next day? Absolutely not, no. This is very unique, this pandemic. It's really stretching all our resources to the max, and a lot of people are seeing what has happened in bigger centers before us that are following that thought that they were well prepared. And so we are looking ahead and trying to see what else we can do so that we do not run critically low on supplies like other centers did. But when you say you have to improvise, what is that like? You're in the midst of a crisis, perhaps that's, if it's not manifesting itself right now, it's around you certainly, and then you're forced to improvise. What is that like to be in the middle of? It's definitely a moving target. It does create a little bit of apprehension, but at the end of the day, we're finding that a lot of brains working together can find solutions, and so these are potential solutions that we're looking at right now. So we'll get through it, hopefully. Sean, are you finding that you're also improvising in this situation? Oh, yeah. One of the major things that we're doing all the time is trying to evaluate the literature and try to evaluate rumor and sort out which is which for search for
Hi. Uh, pretty bored. Yeah, yeah, but I haven't been reading. Uh, I went out with Melvin yesterday. We took a walk just around the block, across the highway, and then went around like Spruceland there along the sidewalk, crossed the highway, and then around my place. Like we did a little round, like a round circle. But that was, and then I went to like Save on Foods early, and I had to get some bread and milk and whatnot for the house. Listen, I'm still having a problem with it being a mess in here. And yeah, oh yeah. It's still a mess in the kitchen. I'm not cleaning it. Uh, they both work. Yeah, like uh, Richard works for the Archdiocese of Prince George, and Steve works for Home Hardware. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna say something today. Yeah, because he doesn't need to be in his room that much. He can clean up his mess at least. It makes it hard for me to get in there. I can't even clean my mess up. You know, you know, yeah, it is. Mm, yeah, because he's been home. He's been home here for several days, but he's been sick. Well, I mean, why not get in the kitchen and clean up your big mess? I don't understand that. And it's a huge mess too, you know. It's not fair. Yeah, you know, I'm gonna say, you know, with nobody driving around, my lungs are a hell of a lot healthier than what because most times of the year, this time of year, they have air quality advisories because of the dust in the air. Right? Yeah, so, well, nobody's driving around. Yeah, it is. Do you think? I personally think there's too many damn people on the planet. Yeah, they're under lockdown. Yeah. How are they gonna physically distance themselves then? How are we gonna do that then? Right. Yeah, I worry about my mental health. It was only you. I got lots of video, lots of little TV shows, movies. I don't have. I don't have. I only have like a few people that I communicate with. You're one of them. Jeremy is online. He's online every morning. He's online all day because he's at home right now. He's a friend. Olga hasn't been seeing me because she's of her age. Well, Olga hasn't been seeing. Well, she'll see me outside, but she won't come here. No, no, no. Yeah, I just I'm on the Facebook and I'm just hanging out there, and there's nothing to do on there either. You know, 50 million. The Spanish flu. The 1918 flu pandemic was an unusually deadly influenza pandemic lasting from January 1918 to December 1920. It infected 50 million people, about a quarter of the world's population at the time. The death toll is estimated to have been anywhere between 17 million to 50 million. Wow. And possibly as high as 100 million, making it one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. Brutal. Just from a flu.
That killed a third of the population in England. A third of the population.
Oh.
Yeah, it's sort of as if
I'm just reading about it now. Spanish flu, also known as it's called the Black. Oh, and the Black Plague. I've heard of that. The Great Plague, or the Plague of less commonly the Great Mortality of the Black Plague, was most devastating pandemic recorded in human history, resulting in the deaths of an estimated 75 to 200 million people in Eurasia, Europe, and Asia, peaking in Europe from 1347 to 1351. Uh, so COVID-19 is actually pretty mild compared to what the other. Oh yeah, oh yeah. on the phone. Yeah, right. Yeah, she doesn't have computer to look on the phone. It really put a rip in our relationship as people. The two of us were a lot closer than telephone. You know, same thing with you and I. You know, yeah, that's right. Yeah, like I might die from it. Yeah, yeah. All right. Thanks. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, you too. So yeah, small friend of mine. She's a Middle Eastern outbreak. Left. Now, mind you, this COVID-19 is in the middle of, it's in the new age.
Reached him in Kitchener, Ontario. Across North America, there is a push to keep this pandemic out of prisons. Al mentioned in New York, where Rikers Island has been.
Oh,
Quand on va voir comment on peut les aider, voir un peu plus clair, ça demande une. So the country's been reduced to a high rate of cardiovascular disease and hypertension, which we know those are both associated with more severe COVID-19 infections and worse outcomes. So that's one thing. The other thing that we know is that there's a very, very high prevalence of mental health concerns in people who are incarcerated. So depression, anxiety, psychosis, all of those things are at a much higher rate amongst people in prison. And so the move to manage this through lockdowns and the fear that I think many of us are feeling in the community, I suspect will have an even greater impact on this population.
Jared mentioned the impossibility of physical distancing. The other part of that is just the opportunity to wash your hands. Here, there's a scramble to get hand sanitizer. People are trying to get it. That's not available in prison, right?
No, and I think, to Elle's point that we're talking about different systems, that's important to keep in mind in Canada. So each province and territory has their own system for folks serving less than 2 years, and then we have the federal system. But what we're hearing from many different institutions is that enough soap to wash your hands is not available. Sometimes no soap is available. And so that very basic measure that Dr. Teresa Tam and all of our medical officers of health are saying, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands, isn't actually possible for people. And then hand sanitizer, because of the alcohol content, is contraband, so that is generally not available. So the things that all of our public health officials are asking us to do to keep us safe really aren't available to people in prison.
If somebody were to get seriously ill with COVID-19 while they were in prison, do you think that they would be sent to hospital to receive medical attention?
Of course.
So I would hope so, and that is certainly the expectation. I think the other thing that I'm seeing as a physician is that our healthcare system and our hospitals are really worried about being overwhelmed. So I think we need to really think about that part of our responsibility to make sure that this doesn't spread in prison is also to make sure that there aren't a lot of people that are then expected to be transferred to hospitals, which we know are worried about running out of ICU beds, we know are worried about their capacity. So I really think when we talk about flattening the curve so we don't overwhelm health systems, that includes prisons. Like these people who are incarcerated are not going to stay for their ICU level care in prison. They will need to be transferred. But that means that there's space in the health system and capacity in the health system for that to happen.
Do prisons generally have kind of emergency plans for pandemics like this? Is that your understanding?
Yeah, so that is my understanding. Prisons have had to confront SARS and the H1N1 outbreak. So they do all have, as far as I know, pandemic plans, again with the caveat that it's a number of different systems across the country. So they have plans. Now, whether these plans are sufficient and adaptable for COVID-19, I think is a real question. And I'm deeply concerned that based on the limitations of prisons and the inability to practice social distancing and the higher rates of underlying comorbidities in people who are in prison, that those plans really just won't be sufficient.
Is there a sense that society is concerned about this? We're all taking on the issues that this pandemic presents, but to Jared's point, and in some ways, you lock somebody up and it's out of sight, out of mind for a lot of people. That we don't think about what life is like behind bars because we're not behind bars. Are we thinking enough about how this pandemic will impact those who are truly held captive?
So I don't think we're thinking enough about it, although I will say that, to Jared's point about Bill Blair saying, we need to get people out of prisons, like, I'm not sure that I ever thought I would see the day that would happen. So I think that there is some movement, and I encourage to see that, but I don't think there's enough, and I don't think it's fast enough. Like, I think one of the things we're really learning is that it's the actions we took 2 weeks ago that influences what the outbreak looks like today. And so that sense of urgency in a congregate setting like a prison is so important. And I don't think that we are concerned enough about this. And I think that, I worry that it's going to be, hindsight being 2020 about what we should have done.
And so briefly then, what could we have done, or what could we still do now?
So I think the number one thing is depopulating prisons, and I think that both includes who's coming into prison and who's leaving prison. So really coming up with any possible way of preventing people from coming into prison. And that's one of the things I worry about when I hear that, we're threatening jail for people who break quarantine orders and that kind of thing. Like, I really think we need to be doing everything in our power to keep people from going into prison. And then people who are in prison, looking at every available mechanism to get them out of there to depopulate. So pushing hard on that work. And then coupled with that is, getting rid of double bunking. Like, can we get enough people out that everybody has their own bunk? Making sure that people have access to cell phones or iPads or whatever it is so they can contact their family and friends on the outside and have that connection.
They have nothing like that.
Connection is so important for people's mental health and ability to cope with this crisis. And then putting into place the pandemic plans, making sure people have access to the basics like enough soap to wash your hands, appropriate personal protective equipment for people working in jail or prison, all of those sorts of things.
Dr. Bodkin, it's good to talk to you about this. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me on that.
Dr. Claire Bodkin, resident physician at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario. We did request comment on this story from Correctional Service of Canada. We did not hear back by airtime. With cases of COVID-19 increasing by the day, some municipalities, as Claire mentioned, are tightening regulations in an effort to stop the spread. In some provinces, including Ontario, Quebec, and Nova Scotia, police are starting to give out hefty fines to those who aren't following the rules, and officers in Nova Scotia have given out some tickets already, tickets holding fines close to $700. Dan Kinsella is the chief of Halifax Regional Police. Chief, good morning.
Good morning, Matt. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How many tickets have you given out thus far?
We've given out 7 since the state of emergency was declared here in Nova Scotia. And we continue, to take the approach where education is our best method. But we've done that now for just over 2 weeks, and we've recently moved into the enforcement area as necessary.
And what would somebody get a ticket for?
Well, there's a number of things that possibly apply, and there's 2 specific acts that we deal with. It's the Health Protection Act and the Emergency Management Act. And Health Protection Act covers things like social distancing and those kind of things, and not obeying those kind of regulations that have been put in place by health. And then there's the Emergency Management Act, which covers things like staying out of prohibited areas. And we've had a number of violations in that area. And the real reason is just to prevent people from congregating and taking that opportunity away. So people don't get invited into situations where they may be congregating.
That seems fairly obvious. Somebody jumping a fence or sliding under a wire to get into a basketball court or something. But the physical distancing piece, I think, is a bit more complex. How do you make sure that somebody's actually breaking the rules? How do your officers go about figuring that out?
Well, I think, really most of it's visual, but all of these interactions between the police and individuals who may be in violation begins with a conversation. And the conversation is, if they're within the physical distancing of 6 feet, we're not talking, within inches or whatever. Generally speaking, people, it's very clear when they're, right up against each other or clearly within the 6 feet distance. And, initially when this started, we had officers driving around in their vehicles using their loud hailers to remind people, because in the early days, people were still congregating, walking together. And for the most part, people complied and did the separation. So really, it's a visual evaluation to start, and then we go from there.
We've heard from police unions about concerns that the officers they represent aren't actually protected when they're trying to do that. You can't issue a ticket generally to somebody and still be physically distancing. Hard to hand a ticket over to somebody from 6 feet away. How do you ensure that your officers are protected?
Well, certainly we've had a big education piece internally with the officers, and we continue to reinforce all of the aspects of protection. All of the officers are issued with personal protection equipment to enable them in those situations where they believe they may be dealing with a COVID situation to don masks and gloves and coveralls even if needed, all those kind of things. We have glasses issued to all the officers so their eyes are protected. And those are situations that officers evaluate every day. And what they're looking for is individuals who may be exhibiting signs of COVID symptoms. And again, starts all with a conversation. Are you feeling well today? Do you have any symptoms? It's these kind of conversations that happen. There are occasions, clearly, because of the nature of the work that the men and women have to do in law enforcement, where the gap has to be closed and they have to move in and take some sort of action. So they try to take every single precaution. There are some inherent dangers in law enforcement, and we do our very best collectively to make sure that the officers are well equipped. And they obviously are well trained, and then they take it from there.
As chief, you apologized to the Black community in your city for street checks in November of last year. In Halifax, I mean, people across the country will know, is a city that has experienced real tension between police and racialized communities. There are concerns from some members of those communities that this is additional pressure, that this could be street checks in a different fashion. What do you do to ensure that the enforcement doesn't blur into the harassment of vulnerable people?
Well, I think first and foremost, this is a community problem here in Halifax. It's a provincial problem in Nova Scotia, and quite frankly, it's a worldwide problem and challenge, certainly. And I recognize that it's difficult for all individuals to practice the social distancing and the not congregating in groups and the self-isolation. But the most important thing, I think, is that we have to go through some short-term sacrifice for some long-term community gain. And that's been the message from the highest levels of government. It's been the message from the highest levels of health. We have taken a very measured approach. That's why we started with education. We're looking for compliance, and then we move forward from there. There is no correlation between us trying to ensure public safety through, education on health issues that are coming from experts. They're not coming from the police. We're just transmitting and being the conduit for the message. So we'll continue to do that in an effort to make sure that we can help the community really help themselves. And one of the messages that I put out there regularly is we need people to help us help them. So my message is we need you to help us help you, and we'll continue to do that. We're not looking to, the enforcement piece is not our main concern. It's the compliance piece for public safety that we're really looking to get the message across.
Just in the last minute or so, why do you think people still aren't getting it? You see this, it's spring, and I get the people are out and they're enjoying themselves, but why aren't people getting the message?
Well, I think, the vast majority of people are doing what they're being asked to do. There are a few that are still taking very, very unnecessary risks. And, the mindset and how they arrive at it, it's very difficult to understand. I think if people are looking at the larger picture, looking at the common good and applying some, common sense approaches, that they will comply. And we'll continue to send that messaging in an effort to help people get there. And that's really what it's about. We really want people to stop taking those unnecessary risks, and we want them to educate themselves on what their responsibilities are and really what the expectations are of the community.
And your sense is that $700 fine, if people aren't getting it before, that will change their minds?
Well, we're hoping. Sometimes people need a little nudge to change behavior, and really it's a specific deterrent for individuals that might get a summary offense ticket. But in a general sense, people know that this is a serious situation, and we all need to abide by the rules.
Dan Kinsella, good to speak with you. Stay healthy.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
Dan Kinsella is the chief of the Halifax Regional Police. The CBC News is next. And then, what is the role of the opposition at a time when the government wants its support and wants everybody to be on the same page? The leader of the Conservative Party, Andrew Scheer, will be my guest coming up in about 6 minutes' time. Lots to talk to him about. I'm Matt Galloway. You're listening to an extended edition of The Current on CBC Radio 1. We'll be back. Stay with us. You're listening to CBC Radio 1, 860 AM in Prince Rupert. Saturday on Movie Night in Canada, 2 Canadian films back to back. First,
ain't no black and white, there's only fast and slow.
the incredible story of legendary gold medalist Jesse Owens in Race. Then,
Just like that, it could all been over.
prejudice and discrimination threatens the career of a young black hockey player in Across the Line. Don't miss Movie Night in Canada, Saturday, starting at 7, 8 Atlantic, 8:30 in Newfoundland on CBC and CBC Gem. The National Research Council official time signal. The beginning of the long dash indicates exactly 10 o'clock Pacific Daylight Saving Time.
This is CBC News from Vancouver. Good morning, I'm Drew Karakis. We are awaiting an announcement from the BC government on the latest temporary measures and supports for people receiving income and disability assistance in our province. Jane Simpson, the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, is expected to begin speaking shortly, and we will go to him live as soon as that news conference begins. In fact, the Minister is going to the podium now and is about to start speaking.
Amish and Tsleil-Waututh people. As we move forward, I'd also like to acknowledge that today is World Autism Day, a day where we acknowledge all of those people across the world who live on the autism spectrum. We know that COVID-19 is having a serious impact on all British Columbians. We know that people are concerned and they're scared. We know that people who are living in poverty and living vulnerable are even more scared and concerned as they move forward. As we do our work in this ministry and across government to support British Columbians, I'm very focused in my ministry on ensuring that we protect people's housing, ensuring that we have food security for families, that they have enough food, nutritious food to eat, that the health supports they require are there, and that we provide as much stability as possible in people's lives in this uncertain time. We've been doing that work across the government in a number of ways, whether it's been protection for renters from eviction, renters grants for those who have lost income, or moving forward in other areas around housing. The Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing and BC Housing are working diligently on that. We've also provided support around food security,
renters from eviction,
$3 million
renters grants for those who have lost income, or moving forward in other areas around housing.
To the United Way for seniors-based community supports to ensure that those supports are in place for seniors who require them. We also have been putting in place supports for those who are struggling with homelessness and those who are street entrenched, and we know we have more to do on that. And today, we're making announcements that will add to those supports for people who are living vulnerable and people who are living poor. Today, I want to announce that as part of the $5 billion investment that our government's making in support of COVID-19 response, we'll be providing for two significant initiatives. First, an automatic $300 monthly
for people who are living vulnerable and people who are living poor. Today,
for the months of April, May, and June, for everyone receiving income and disability assistance moving forward. This will also include support for those who receive the senior supplement from the BC government or a comforts allowance for those in special care.
So that's what that $300
over 250,000 people in British Columbia over the next 3 months. I also want to announce a temporary exemption for all federal employment insurance benefits, including the new $2,000 Canada Emergency Response Benefit for people receiving provincial income and disability assistance. What this means is that for a number of British Columbians who are on income or disability assistance, they have an earning exemption. They can earn up to $15,000 a year in the case of an individual on disability benefits. For those who will qualify and be able to apply for EI because they've lost their employment, or to apply for the new emergency response benefit, they will be able to apply for that benefit, receive that benefit, and not have that deducted from their disability or income assistance check. There will be no clawback on this. These are important matters moving forward from my office. As I said, we expect that this will impact about 205,000 people who receive supports from my ministry directly. It also will support 58,000 seniors, low-income seniors. These are seniors who currently receive the senior supplement from British Columbia, which is $49 supporting those who receive old age security and the guaranteed income supplement. That will now be increased also to $300 for the following 3 months. It also will support about 4,000 people who receive support from our ministry who are in specialized care facilities receiving treatments for a range of care. These benefits mean that anyone on income or disability assistance who are eligible will get support. Also, we're announcing at this point that since BC Transit and TransLink have suspended fares, those on disability assistance who currently receive a bus pass or a Compass card as their transportation supplement, we will be putting the $52 that the cost of that onto their April checks so that they will be able to have that cash as well as they move forward, since currently they're not required to have those bus passes. We will continue going forward with this as long as fares are suspended. And I would assure people that they still will have access, obviously, to bus passes and other services. We know that this is a difficult time. We know that we need to provide supports for people, and these supports today, it's our hope, are another step in the process of being able to ensure that those people on income assistance or those people on disability assistance in our province will be supported moving forward with this crisis supplement and this exemption for federal initiatives. Again, these programs will be in place for the next 3 months. And as is always the case with the work around COVID-19, the government will be continuing to monitor and look at the programs as we move forward, and will adapt and adjust them accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We will now take questions, but before we do that, a couple of reminders to the media. Those who wish to ask questions, please press *1 to line up. We will be taking only one question per reporter, and please make sure that your handsets are unmuted. You will not be audible till you hear your name. We will now begin with Richard Zisman. Richard, go ahead.
Minister Simpson, will those receiving income and disability assistance be eligible for the up to $500 for the renters program that your government has created, and how quickly will those on assistance see this money on their checks?
Well, to take the second part of that question first, this money will be available on the April 22nd check, the next check that goes out on April 22nd. I would point out that we continue to have a number of other targeted crisis supplements for food, for shelter, clothing, other matters like that are available to people if they're finding it particularly challenging between now and April 22nd. But these funds, the $300, will be on the April check, and there's no requirement for any application. That money will be there moving forward. The $500 renters grant was for people who lost income moving forward. So that will not be there for those folks who qualify the $2,000 and will get the $2,000 or will qualify the earning exemption, as they will also continue to receive their assistance checks moving forward.
The next question is from Tanya Fletcher, CBC. Go ahead, please.
Oh, yes. Hi, Minister. I'm just wondering, a lot of people who aren't maybe able to have online access given the closure of libraries, et cetera, how can they, get more information, or what supports are available for them who rely on those public places to get online?
We are looking at ways to support that obviously is very important. We are encouraging folks to not come into our offices if they can help it, but to contact us by phone or online. They can call absolutely to get further information. We'll also be disseminating information through a number of the agencies that work with folks who are living on income assistance and disability assistance. And we're hoping and relying on you as the media to help us to get the word out to people too, as we move forward, to ensure that everybody understands what the program is and understands the supports that they can expect and anticipate in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you. The next question comes from David Moko, CTV. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Minister. I want to ask you about home share providers. I've been talking to several. There's a woman named Karen Anderson. She's in Coquitlam. She cares for a woman who has early onset dementia and Down syndrome for 30 years. She says she considers her client to be like her daughter. She says in this crisis, quote, I'm feeling abandoned like the dirt on the bottom of someone's shoe. She is worried if she becomes ill, they're going to fall through the cracks. What can you tell her?
I guess the first thing I want to say to Karen and to others who are supporting those with developmental disabilities, a huge thank you. We're working very closely with Community Living BC and the Provincial Health Office to be able to deliver these services. There are standards that have been set by Dr. Bonnie Henry's office around what we should expect, and we're working closely to make sure that we deliver those services. I want to ensure all of the home share providers that supports are available from CLBC. We're meeting on a weekly basis with the sector, both with advocates and family members, and also with the service providing agencies as well. So I would, I guess all I can do at this point is provide as much confidence as possible that we understand the important work that's being done by home share providers. We understand the supports that they need, and we will do everything possible to make sure that Karen and all the people who deliver those important services receive the supports they need to be able to support people that are living with.
The next question is from Lisa Cordasco, CHLY. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Minister. There are thousands of British Columbians who receive the federal disability payment. What happens to them in all of this?
I'm not sure that I totally understood the question. If you could just ask one more time, please.
Yes, well, thousands of British Columbians receive the federal disability payment. They are not on the provincial plan, so they do not qualify for any provincial program under your plan. But many of those people were forced onto the federal system by your system, which says if you qualify, you must be on that system and not on the provincial one. So what do you say to the thousands of British Columbians who receive federal disability payments, who are probably hurting just as much, but they don't qualify for this new supplement we've announced today?
Well, as I've said, a large part of the work, and Minister James in developing the $5 billion initiative to support British Columbians. It really is about looking at what the federal government is doing, how federal programs are being developed, and then working to make our programs, provincial programs, as complementary as possible, with the objective of meeting people's needs and providing some comfort and assurance that people's core needs will be met. And that's what we're doing here with these initiatives. As I said, about 250,000 people will receive those supports moving forward through these programs. And we continue to work with our federal counterparts to look at where there are gaps and where people may be struggling for supports. And those folks who are receiving federal supports, there's always ongoing discussions, I know, between my officials and officials in the provincial government and the federal government to try to close those gaps around ensuring that everybody who has needs are seeing their core needs being met.
Thank you. The next question is from Lisa Yudza, News 1130.
Just quickly, can you say again the dollar value and the number of people who will be benefiting from the program being announced today?
Absolutely. There are two significant initiatives today. The first is a $300 crisis supplement that will be added to people's monthly assistance payments. That will go to all people receiving income and disability assistance who do not receive the federal emergency funds. That will impact about 250,000 people. It will include about 205,000 people who are directly supported by my ministry, about 58,000 senior citizens who receive the OAS and GIS supplement and the provincial supplement today, and about 4,000 people who live in special care facilities. In addition to that, those people who have earnings, mostly people on disability benefits and single moms, the vast majority, if they qualify for the federal initiatives through EI or the emergency program, they will be eligible to collect that money up to the $2,000 a month put forward by the federal government, and they will not lose their provincial benefit income assistance or disability assistance check. Those checks, as they are today, will remain whole.
Thank you. And another reminder to the media, if you wish to ask questions, please press *1 to line up for the questions. Next question is from Andrew McLeod, the Tyee.
Yeah, hi, Minister. You mentioned 15,000 as the amount for earnings exemptions. I'm wondering if that's an increase or if that's just the figure up to now. Are you actually increasing earnings exemptions? And I'm also wondering about the eligibility requirements. In particular, people have been calling for the acid test and the requirement to look for work to be relaxed. Are you doing anything around that or considering it?
Yes, the earning exemption had been up until, I guess, we passed the legislation in the last sitting, had been $12,000 a year. We increased that earning exemption at that time to $15,000 a year in recognition mostly that the increases in minimum wage were having an impact on people's earning and reducing the number of hours. So we increased that both for persons on disability benefits and others. So that is an increase over what had been $12,000 a year there. We have waived around other requirements. We have waived the work search for this period of time. We've suspended it, so we are not asking people who are coming to income assistance or who are applying to participate in a work search at this point. And we'll review that all again, of course, when we get past the crisis we're in.
Thank you. The next question is from Rob Shaw, Vancouver Sen. Please go ahead. Rob, are you there? Moving on, we'll take the last question from Dirk Meissner, CP. Dirk, go ahead, please.
Hi, Minister. Can you tell me $300 a month? How large will how much will the payment be now that somebody receives?
Well, maybe to give you a couple of examples of what people are earning today. For example, a single person on disability benefits today receives $1,183.42. So they will get an additional $300 on top of that. A single mom with two kids would receive $1,609.08. They would receive the additional $300 on top of that.
Thank you. That will be all. Thank you for participating.
$1,163.
I'm Stephen Quinn in Vancouver. Good morning. This is a CBC News special. Shane Simpson, the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, has just announced the government's plan for temporary COVID-19 supports for people receiving income and disability assistance in BC. Just to recap some of what was said, it includes a $300 monthly COVID-19 supplement for April, May, and June for everyone on income assistance or disability assistance. There's a temporary earning exemption for people on disability assistance. They can now earn up to $15,000 a year without having that deducted from their disability or income assistance check. And since TransLink and BC Transit have waived fares for the time being, people who qualify for a supplemented transit pass will have that added to their April checks. That news from Shane Simpson, the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction here in BC. We have two guests with us to take us through the remainder of this half hour. Viveka Ellis is the interim community organizer with the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition. Iglika Ivanova is a senior economist with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, both of them on the line with us this morning. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Viveka, to you first, just how satisfied is the BC Poverty Coalition with the announcement that we've just heard from the Minister?
Well, we are not displeased with some of these measures. Providing $300 per month for the next check is a move that we have advocated for. We had asked the Minister to provide a significant monthly raise to the rates. However, we're disappointed that it won't continue necessarily beyond 3 months.
Yeah.
And we would also advocate for a much faster release of those funds. People are in dire need right now, so to have to wait until the April 22nd check release is a long time. So we would have preferred to see an immediate emergency release of that top-up at this time. And also more sweeping measures to end a greater sweep of clawbacks so that people could keep more funds in their pockets. And also a permanent end to the clawback of employment insurance because we know this is temporary and that is income that people can access that we currently claw back. So we would like to see that in the long run kept in place.
And Vivica, how far do you see that $300 monthly top-up going for people on income assistance or disability assistance?
Well, it is going to make a difference at this time. So we discussed with the minister that we wanted to see a minimum of $1,000 per person in emergency funding, whether that was distributed in a lump sum or distributed over a number of months. We thought that was at least for an immediate response, a decent amount. So $300 does make a difference. I think what we've been hearing from people all around the province, single mother-led families, individuals, folks living in the downtown east side, is that without the food security that they experience is income-based. Food security is defined as inadequate or insecure income to purchase food. So based on the fact that our rates are so far below the poverty line, people were not able to go out and stockpile themselves. That would to enable them to follow the protocols that our health officials are asking us to do now. So, or they went down to the grocery store with the little money they did have to buy a bag of flour, and people with more means had bought all of the flour. So hopefully this will provide people with the income in their pocket to access the greater food security so that they can self-isolate at this time and ensure that they're not actually self-isolating with deep food security, which means not being able to feed your children the 3 meals a day and snacks that they need. But again, we had advocated for raising the rate up to within 75% of the market basket measure when we debuted our poverty reduction strategy. So this is a move that we could have made some time ago that would have meant that people were not in the great risk that they're in now. So it's good to see, but we should have done it before, and really we should make it permanent.
Iglika, from the point of view of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, what do you think of the measures you've just heard?
On one hand, I think we should applaud the government for stepping in to do something for people on social assistance and disability assistance. As far as I'm aware, no other provincial governments have yet announced significant support for that group, which will not qualify for the federal benefits that have been announced so far. So that's a good thing. But and it's also very good that should anybody on social and disability assistance qualify for federal benefits, those would not be clawed back. That is very, very important. But it is a very small minority of people who actually will qualify. The one thing I didn't hear the minister say is whether the $1,000 emergency BC benefit that they announced previously would apply to people on social assistance. And that makes me think that it won't, which is a problem in a way because they're offering $300 a month for 3 months or $900 total for social and disability assistance clients, and that's still less than the $1,000 everybody else who else income is going to get. So I don't think that's fair. And to give context to what Vivek Ellis was saying around how far below the poverty line our welfare rates are, a single person on temporary assistance who's expected to work will get $760 a month plus $300. That's still just over $1,000 a month. As opposed to if you were laid off from your job, the federal government can give you $2,000 a month. So that's a very large discrepancy between what we think someone should live in if they lost their job versus what someone is expected to survive on social assistance. And when you consider that the poverty line is actually close to $2,000 a month using the latest revision of the market basket measure that came out in February. So we actually are still seeing welfare rates for a single person that are about half of the poverty line, and that's not right.
And Vivica, of course, we have to remember that that $760 for a person who is considered to be single and employable, that includes their shelter allowance as well.
Yes, it does. So, we have, people living on ministry support throughout the province are living in a depth of poverty that is really quite unimaginable to many. And there's one thing I'd like to point out, Stephen, if I may, that, while these benefits and the supplements are targeting people who are in the system, who receive income through PWD or income assistance, we have to remember that this ministry is also responsible for all those who are not within the system, who will not benefit from the measures that were announced today, and that's the over 7,000 homeless people throughout the province. So Minister Simpson, mentioned that, BC Housing and others tasked with moving people into empty hotel stock that would provide the sanitation that people need today, that they're working diligently on that. But we have to remember there are thousands of British Columbians living in abject poverty without access to sanitation at great risk for contracting COVID, are not included in the measures that are announced today. So we would just want to mention that it's absolutely crucial to really light a fire under those efforts to safeguard those in the greatest depths of poverty who are still completely unprotected.
Iglika, there have been a number of financial supports announced by both the provincial and federal governments. How do people wade through what they qualify for and how to apply for it?
It is a challenge to go through all of the application processes. That's why I was encouraged to see the minister today announce that the $300 a month for people on social and disability assistance would not require an application. It would be an automatic payment. And I do think the government should, as much as possible, make these payments automatic without requiring application. But both provincial and federal government websites have links to supports available for individuals that would help them kind of figure out what they might be eligible for and where to go to apply.
And Vivica, we have seen libraries close, community centers close, many social services have now moved online. How has COVID-19 affected people who rely on income or disability assistance compared to other people in BC, someone who may have been laid off from their job, for instance?
Well, what we've heard from around the province is what I mentioned before, that due to the hoarding of groceries throughout the province, that people who live very, very close to the wire and have to every week, ration $20, $17 for the protein and the food that they need, have not, of course, they haven't been able to do what everybody else was doing, which was stocking your shelves and preparing to self-isolate. So that's a huge impact. The fact that we don't provide, universal internet access within the province has been a huge issue because majority of people that we've heard from, they do go to the library every day to access information. So what we're hearing from many, many organizers and organizations in the downtown east side and around the province is that without access to information, fear takes hold, and there's misinformation and lack of information. So again, lack of action around facilitating access to essential services that had to close is something that we would like to see much greater focus on. And another piece is that we have to remember that in terms of low-income families accessing the technology they need to go online and be in school, that we have to make sure that the new systems we create temporarily don't replicate inequities in access to information and technology, especially.
Thank you both for being along with us this morning. We are just about out of time. We certainly appreciate you listening along with us. Thank you. Vivica Ellis, Interim Community Organizer with the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition. Iglika Ivanova, Senior Economist with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. I'm Stephen Quinn. This has been a special broadcast on CBC Radio 1 in British Columbia. Shane Simpson, the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, has just announced the government's temporary plan for COVID-19 supports for people receiving income and disability assistance in BC. We will bring you more details on that throughout the morning and on BC Today. Stay with us now for the CBC Local News headlines at 10:30.
It's 10:30. I'm Will Fundal. You're listening to CBC Radio 1, 91.5 FM in Prince George, where it's sunny and minus 10 degrees. In Prince Rupert this hour, sunny and 3 degrees. Terrace, sunny and minus 3 degrees. Port St. John, partly cloudy, minus 17 degrees. In the news, the BC government has announced a temporary monthly supplement for people on disability and income assistance, and certain seniors in the province. Shane Simpson, the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, says they will receive an additional $300 for April, May, and June. It's part of the government's $5 billion financial aid plan in response to the ongoing coronavirus crisis. Simpson says about 250,000 people in British Columbia will be eligible for the temporary benefit. The spread of COVID-19 has had an impact on real estate sales, and specifically in Metro Vancouver, the real estate board says there has been a significant increase in the number of sales the first half of March over the same period last year, but the numbers tailed off as concerns about the pandemic took hold. Board President Ashley Smith says there were an average of 138 daily sales in the first 10 business days of March. That daily average fell to 93 as concerns about the pandemic intensified. You're listening to CBC Radio 1.
Hi, I'm Matt Galloway. You're listening to The Current. It can be difficult keeping the romantic spark alive under the best of circumstances. When you are under orders to stay home 24 hours a day for weeks on end, whether with your lover, apart from your lover, or looking for a lover, well, that can be near to impossible. So we thought we'd call in some help. A sex and relationship columnist, Dan Savage, will join us shortly. But first, thought we'd check in with a couple for whom intimacy got a big boost back in March. That's when Josh and Anastasia Davis tied the knot. They're at home in Coquitlam, British Columbia. Good morning.
Morning.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
This is not perhaps the honeymoon that you would have expected.
No, definitely not.
How have things been going?
Actually, pretty good. It's been a crazy week for us. As you guys kind of know, our story's gone a little bit viral.
It sure has.
So we've been dealing with all of that and trying to start our life together in the same house in self-isolation for the most part, as self-isolated as you can be, and yeah, it's been great.
Anastasia, when did you realize that the wedding that you had planned was not going to happen the way that you thought it would? Anastasia, are you there?
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Sorry. When did you realize that the wedding that you had planned wasn't actually going to happen the way you thought it would?
Well, a thing after another had started to cancel about 3 weeks ago, I would say. Like, it was in the last month. It just kind of started to, like, one thing got canceled and another. And so I think March 16th was when it hit pretty hard, when the gatherings went from 250 to 50 people. And that's when we knew that our wedding has to, at this point, completely change, because our venue wasn't hosting our wedding at all.
But you didn't postpone it. You kept going.
Sorry?
You didn't postpone the wedding. You kept going with the idea of getting married still on the 22nd.
Yes, yeah. So we were still going with the April start idea. We just had wanted to change now from venue. We thought, okay, now we're just going to do like a Plan B backyard wedding. Josh's parents are nice, fun-sized backyard. So we decided that we're just going to do like, we're going to rent some tables and just make it really like cute backyard wedding. So we stick with the April 3rd, but then we just had to uninvite most of our friends at that point, because our guest list was about 135 people.
How difficult was that to uninvite people, Josh? You have great plans for a wedding, you think about it, and then suddenly a lot of people aren't able to be there around you.
Yeah, it was really hard, especially you can imagine telling church friends that you feel like you're on the same level with everyone, and then you have to limit your list down to family and then a few plus ones from church, and that was really tough, and it was something that neither Anastasia or I were really looking forward to doing, obviously. But yeah, we had to do that, and that was the plan was going to be going from 50 down to going from 135-ish down to 50.
50. That's it's a small little wedding. Everybody's healthy and safe. I'm assuming that was there. We're now being told that you can't really gather even in groups of 15.
Yeah. So for at least for BC at the time, we didn't have any restrictions on groups under 50, other than trying to social distance as best as possible. And so that was kind of when we had to change our plans again, as more and more people were deciding to, they were texting us either saying that someone in their family is a vulnerable person or someone else is exhibiting some symptom of COVID-19. So that was when we changed our minds and really had to think about it. Do we want to be doing any kind of gathering of even 50 people, or should we just basically cancel the whole plan for April 3rd anyways and go sooner with an even smaller group and just do essentially our immediate family and a couple of necessary plus ones?
Can you throw Anastasia back on the line?
Yeah.
You decide to get married. You get into the limo. You head out to have your pictures taken. This is a beautiful story. Just briefly tell us what happened.
Yeah, so as soon as we had our little mini living room ceremony of less than 15 people in Josh's parents' living room, our limo had arrived, so we hopped into the limo, and there was just myself, there was Josh, and Josh's best man, and Josh's sister, so a best man and a maid of honor. There was only 4 of us, where from the beginning there was supposed to be 10 of us, but we had to cancel everything, and so we just hopped into the limo, and we were driving, and as we were driving to the place where we were supposed to be taking pictures, we were actually talking to Greg, which is Josh's best man, and we were saying how thankful we are for all of our friends, all of our family members, because they've been so good, they've been so understanding, and because we had to make so many changes to our plans, we were just so grateful that people weren't like judging us, and we changed our wedding date, and it was just so nice that they had our back. And as we were driving, Greg says, "Why don't you guys roll your windows?" And we're like, "Okay, sure." And we roll our windows, and then we kind of saw like some people parked on the street has like balloons, and we thought to ourselves, we're like, probably someone's already there ahead of us. Maybe there's like a birthday party or another wedding, and we're like, dang it, like under the odds that someone else is gonna take our like picture place. But as we approached even closer, we're like starting to realize that we know that person, and we just started realizing that these are like all of our friends that couldn't make it, that we had to uninvite, like our wedding party that couldn't be there anymore. They were there as well, and we just started crying. It was so overwhelming because it was like we did not know any of it.
You won't forget this moment for a bunch of reasons. It's a real pleasure to talk to you. Congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
Really, thank you. Anastasia and Josh Davis.
Just wondering how you're doing. Hopefully you're doing okay. And
these are very unusual times for
take
people
care of
to get creative in the quest for love. And of course, if you are a newlywed, maybe you've been together with your partner for a long time, maybe you're separated by physical distancing. These are also unprecedented times. Dan Savage is a relationship and sex advice columnist and the host of the Savage Lovecast. He has been exploring love and sex in the time of the pandemic, and he's here to share his wisdom. We should probably warn you that this could be a mature conversation. You may want to practice a bit of physical distancing with your kids if they're around the radio. Dan Savage, good morning to you. Good morning. What are you hearing from your listeners and your readers about the strain that confinement is putting on our relations?
Well, the strain that confinement is putting on the relationships of people who are a couple of them are suddenly together 24 hours a day. One thing we know about relationships, sustaining them, keeping them healthy, keeping the spark alive, is that time apart is really important. Having different experiences is really important. So when you come home at the end of the day, you have something to share, and being out together and sometimes seeing your partner through the eyes of others
can re-stir our desire for our partners. All those things are gone right now. And there's that strain. It's important to be patient and kind with each other. Often when it comes to relationships, we talk about, people who are opposites on different kinds of issues. Some people stress by becoming horny, and some people react to stress by having their libidos completely tank and crater. And so if you're mixed matched in that way, that can become an engine of conflict. The last thing any of us need right now is an engine of conflict while we're all cooped up together. So just acknowledging if you're on different pages and being patient and kind and indulgent with each other. And even if sex isn't going to happen, you can still have intimacy, you can still have touch. Sometimes if you have intimacy and touch, sex will break out. But if you go into it with the pressures and expectations that sex must happen, that can make the person who's feeling less horny or less desire feel bullied or pressured or coerced. And you don't want that because that's the opposite of desire. And so people have to be patient, feel and kind. Most of the people I'm hearing from in my column and my podcast are people who are trying to game out what they're allowed to do. They don't live with their partner, or they have multiple partners. Can their partner come over? Is it safe to see your multiple partners? And it's not. Your partner shouldn't come over unless you guys are going to shelter in place together. If you want to be intimate, you're going to have to get creative with text messaging, video chat services, and dirty phone calls, and keeping the spark alive that way.
You can imagine that would be really complicating for somebody, you mentioned, somebody who's apart, long distance relationship, whether it's in the same city and you might be together, or whether you live in other parts of the country or other parts of the world.
Yes, it's very complicated. Long distance relationships are a strain and complication that people often talk about. With this added element of not knowing when you're going to be able to get back together again in the same place, with travel shutting down, everyone's going to really have to dig deep, find their stories of patience and resilience around relationship to sustain those relationships, and use the tools that allow us to maintain social contact and even sexual contacts without physically being in the same place. Get online, get on FaceTime, get on Zoom, text message, sex message. These are not, the dirty sex advice columnists' suggestions. These are suggestions that are being cranked out by health departments and by state governments. So
why do you think that is? I mean, and it's not to say what you do is normally the dirty sex columnist, but why would health departments be saying that this is so important at a time like this?
To slow the spread and to flatten the curve. If we make exceptions and violate isolation to go get our rocks off, it's not something that happens outside of the possibility of infection. This is a very easily transmitted infection, and it's not just people who are in the much more vulnerable groups who are at risk. There are young people who have died, and to get through this, we're really going to have to all be monogamists now.
Which is something unusual for Dan Savage to say.
It's very unusual for me to say that non-monogamy is canceled and polyamory is canceled, because I've written a great deal about both those subjects, not to proselytize, but so that people who, monogamy isn't the right model for them, isn't going to make them happy, don't make monogamous commitments because they feel they have no other option. It's a disaster for monogamous relationships, and people who can't do monogamy enter into them. We want people who can't do monogamy out to make monogamous commitments. But right now, a kind of situational monogamy may be forced on us. We should only be having sex with people that we live with, who are our sex partners. That doesn't mean your parents. Only have sex with people that you live with who want to have sex with you. And if you don't live with your lovers and you aren't sheltering in place, and then one of you doesn't want to move into the other's house for the duration, we call that in Savage Love, won't you be my quarantine? Won't you be my Valentine? And somebody doesn't want to move in, traversing the city to get to each other, taking public transportation. You put yourself at risk, you put others at risk, you put your partner at risk, and then you put the people that you are sheltering in place with, if they are back at home without your lovers, your parents, for instance, you put them at risk. And none of that can happen right now. And as a gay man, and a 55-year-old gay man, I have to say, some of this panic
And these sudden limitations are so very like what the gay community went through in the early 80s.
I was going to ask you about the resonances of the AIDS HIV crisis and what people thought about in terms of being fearful in some ways.
It was terrifying. It was terrifying, but we still sought it out because it's so important to our mental health. But people are talking about getting tested. People are talking about getting infected. People are talking about safe sex in the pandemic. We're hearing stories of people dying alone. For a lot of gay men and others who survived the AIDS crisis, hearing these things is drudging up a lot of trauma. We understand what kind of the world is going through now because we went through it in a different way then. HIV was much harder to transmit, obviously, than COVID is. And so it was possible to figure out what safe sex was and how to have it. But right now, safe sex is very different when you're talking about COVID. It is a partner that you're already having sex with and that you live with. And with that partner, you don't need to use barriers. You have sex if you're sharing a living environment. You don't have, you can be intimate, you can be within 6 feet of each other, you can be inside each other. But you can't head out there into the world and seek out new partners, which is really difficult for a lot of people.
Let me ask you, we have a couple of seconds left, two very quick kind of one-word question answers. Do you think that there will be, people talk about the idea of, a quarantine baby boom 9 months from now. Is that going to happen?
No, there's going to be a quarantine divorce boom. We've already seen it in China, where cities that had been on lockdown for months, when those lockdowns were eased, there was a huge boom in divorce. And with so much uncertainty in the world, and access, people not knowing how long this is going to go on, and access to hospitals and doctors being limited or being terrified of going to a hospital or seeing the doctor when you're pregnant, I don't think there's going to be a baby boom. People said the same thing after 9/11. There would be 9/11 baby boom. There wasn't.
Well, the second question was about divorce, and you answered it right there. So we'll leave it at that. Dan, great to talk to you. Stay healthy and safe.
Thank you. Same to you and your listeners.
Dan Savage, columnist and the host of the Savage Lovecast. He was in Seattle, Washington. This is The Current on CBC Radio 1. I'm Matt Galloway. Extended edition of the program. We're joined once again by our pal, Tom Power. He's the host of Q. Hello, Tom.
Matt, thanks for bringing me on after that. Thanks for bringing the folk musician on after that. I really appreciate it.
I think we could probably draw some connections between the two, but maybe we'll just leave it at that.
Oh, yeah, the auto harp.
Definitely fits into the conversation. The auto harp, sure. Modern Family. You've been watching a lot of Modern Family?
I have. I've been watching an awful lot of Modern Family over the years. It's just kind of a nice break from the day over the past few years that it's been on. It's one of those shows that somehow been loved by critics and by even by any sort of non-critics, us.
Yeah.
So after 11 seasons, Modern Family is finally ending. I got to speak to Emmy Award-winning actor Ty Burrell on saying goodbye to his character, the middle-aged dad, Bill Dumpty.
How are you?
I'm good, Tom. Thanks for having me on.
It's a joy to have you on. I want to talk about the show. I want to talk about your initiative, and not a lot of people in Canada might not know about this. This is the Tip Your Server project. I didn't know you were involved in the bar industry at all. Tell me a little bit about that. Tell me a little bit about this initiative.
Yeah, my brother and I and a few other short sale relatives in Utah own a few businesses that are mostly bars. And what happened in Salt Lake is that in addition to COVID-19, and this is really
Hi,
breaking
is Jan you there? Oh, I was just, my name's Chris LeBlanc, and I know Tanya. I used to live upstairs. The first time was a year and a half, and then the second time was 6 months. So I got to know Wayne Hughes and Tanya quite well. So, okay. All right, dude.
meadow or waterfall. He's always the person who, no matter almost any circumstance you find him, is in a place of sort of blissful emptiness. And I say that, not even, I really don't think that Phil Dunphy is, that character is really dumb. Like, our writer didn't write him as dumb. They just wrote him in a kind of a positive, a lovely, oblivious way. And it's every day going to work to play Phil is a pleasure, because who wouldn't want to, show up and play somebody who's, no matter where you find him, is in a good mood. It's essentially the sound of, tall grass swaying.
I want to play a clip from the show. Take a listen to this.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
It's okay. Maybe they didn't see anything.
Sweet, they screamed, they dropped a tray of dishes, and they ran out of here like they were on fire.
You were on fire, lady.
Really? You're still going?
Well, forgive me for thinking your zesty performance deserves some praise.
That is Phil and Claire Dunphy from Modern Family in a compromising situation that parents might be finding themselves in right now as they're home self-isolating with their kids.
COVID babies, is that going to be like baby boomers? There's going to be a whole range of kids born during this time.
Yeah, like a Generation 19 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Generation 19. Yeah.
It's interesting to see you and Julie Bowen, who plays Claire. You guys are getting older in this show, and I don't know how to say this delicately, but you're also getting older yourself. Like your character's going through a midlife crisis, sort of at the same time you're turning 50. Could you relate to that at all?
Absolutely. What's interesting actually is that I think they have Phil like 2 years younger, I think, than I actually am. So I was experiencing turning 50 and feeling older before the character was. So in essence, I was really prepared to talk about, that kind of thing. But in reality, I was dealing with, I really genuinely love physical comedy, and I had this one opportunity after another to just have some of the best times of my life. But as I got, around even 9, all of this was like, could we possibly get this all in like 3 takes? Could we put one more layer of padding down for this very basic, simple fall?
I heard you learn how to use a jetpack when you were like 50.
Oh my God, yes. I feel so lucky because I had so many experiences like that. I got to ride a jetpack. I got roofs like a because of snow. I did trapeze. I've done tightrope. There's all these life experiences that I got because of playing Phil. The jetpack specifically was on my 50th birthday, and it was an amazing. I really took a moment and thought, this is crazy. I'm 50 years old and doing a jetpack. Luckily, the water was soft because I fell a lot, but it was amazing. Yeah.
It's been such an amazing run, and Modern Family has meant so much to us in a time like this. I just have 2 kind of quick questions before we go. One, when you look back on your time on the show, what's a memory that you'll take with you forever?
I have a few of these memories that I think I'm going to remember more than anything, and it's really the group scene that we filmed together. Those scenes, I just feel like they went so far for the off-screen relationships of all of us. We all grew very tight with each other. It was an amazing thing that everybody, not it was not perfect, but for the most part, everybody got along through the whole thing. And those good group scenes were sort of like all-day alcohol-free party. A lot of like do a take and working hard on the material, but then you're also kind of
And before we go, how do you think Phil would be handling self-isolating during the pandemic right now?
Well, I know for sure she's working really hard on a magic. I also think that there would be some incredible invention, ultimately useless, but some really elaborate invention that would come out of it. I don't know what it would be, but it would probably involve, a variety of household goods, and ultimately it would serve no purpose.
Ty, man, thanks so much for talking to me. Congrats on the final episode, and congrats on a great run, on a great show.
Thank you, Tom. Be well up there, and I think we'll get everybody at the table.
That's Tom Power speaking with Ty Burrell of Modern Family. Tom, it was a sad night last night in the world of music when it comes to this pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like every day we're waking up to sadder and sadder news around the arts community. Last night we found out that Adam Schlesinger from the band Fountains of Wayne passed away. He was just 52 years old. He had a number of hits, one I'll get to in just a second, but even after that we found out that Ellis Marsalis Jr., father of Wynton and Branford Marsalis, but most importantly, father of modern jazz education in New Orleans, responsible for so much of the jazz music in New Orleans right now, passed away as well. So it's an incredibly sad time. We're keeping an eye on all of these things. Adam Schlesinger, you might know Fountains of Wayne. They had a really big hit with a song called Stacy's Mom. They also had a number of really big power pop hits. Ed Robertson from Bare Naked Ladies talking about them as a major influence on them. But my favorite is this song they recorded for Tom Hanks's sort of fake Beatles biopic about a band called The Wonders. They wrote this song called That Thing You Do, and I thought we could play it in his honor.
What a great idea. Tom, thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Breaking my heart into a million pieces, like you always do. And you don't mean to be cruel. You never even knew about the heartache I've been going through. We'll try to forget you now, but it's not so hard to do. Every time you do that thing you do. All the things you say.
In memory of the great Adam Schlesinger, one of the best pop singer-songwriters of our generation. That is a song, the title track from the Tom Hanks film, That Thing You Do. Coming up after the news, what are you going to do with all those beans that are in your pantry? The chef, Samin Nosrat, will be here to talk about home cooking at a time when we're all stuck at home. That's on its way. This is The Current. I'm Matt Galloway. Stay with us. This is CBC Radio 1, 88.3 FM in Fort St. John.
It's 11.
In order to provide Canadians with the latest information about COVID-19, CBC Radio is changing its morning programming. The Current with Matt Galloway is extending until noon in most time zones, providing the latest updates, analysis, and context, as well as stories of hope and inspiration. The Current with Matt Galloway, weekday mornings at 8:37. And for all the latest, check CBC, CBC News Network, CBC Listen, and the CBC News app. Tonight at 9:30 in Newfoundland, it's Q.
The actor Ty Burrell plays Phil Dunphy in the sitcom Modern Family, and Ty says he's charmed by the innocence and optimism of the middle-aged dad that he portrays, and in the middle of a global pandemic, maybe it's worth asking, what would Phil Dunphy do?
This is CBC News from Vancouver. Good morning, I'm Drew Carrington. The BC government says it is taking more steps to provide temporary assistance to people who need it the most. Poverty Reduction Minister Shane Simpson has introduced 2 new measures that he says are meant to provide some relief during the current COVID-19 COVID-19 pandemic, we'll be providing for two significant initiatives. First, an automatic $300 monthly COVID-19 crisis supplement for the next 3 months. So for the months of April, May, and June, for everyone receiving income and disability assistance. The province is also offering a temporary exemption for all federal employment insurance benefits for people who receive provincial income or disability assistance. The number of coronavirus cases in Canada has now surpassed 10,000, with more than 130 deaths. Canadians across the country are feeling anxious because of the uncertainty about how long the pandemic will continue and what further impacts it might have. Prime Minister Trudeau says he plans to speak with the provincial and territorial leaders today with the goal of collecting better data. More from the CBC's David Thurton.
You want to plan. You want to prepare for the worst. You want to know what to be hopeful about. I know.
Today, Justin Trudeau acknowledged the frustration many are feeling. He and his government are under pressure to tell Canadians what they know about how long this epidemic might last, when physical distancing will end, and when Canadians can get back to work.
And we'll have more information soon.
Getting more information, the Prime Minister says, depends partly on the provinces and territories. This evening, Trudeau says he'll speak with the premiers about ways to improve data collection and modeling. On the agenda as well, supporting healthcare workers.
This includes sending personal protective equipment and other supports for the healthcare system.
Trudeau said last night his government received around 1 million new masks. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
The housing market in Metro Vancouver saw steady demand from people buying homes in March, but that demand leveled off later in the month as concerns about the coronavirus increased. The Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver says sales were sharply up in March compared to the same month last year. Also, to 2,500 homes sold across the region, an increase of almost 50% over last March.
Yes, hi.
You've probably seen more people wearing homemade face masks these days. As Mickey Cowan reports, there's no proof they offer greater protection from the coronavirus.
Staff at the Union Gospel Mission serve some of the city's most vulnerable every day, but now they're doing it wearing brightly colored, hand-sewn face masks.
The world is a scary place right now. At least this will provide some warmth, some play.
Spokesperson Jeremy Hunka says they've made hundreds in the hopes of protecting the homeless people they serve.
They're the most at risk. We need to take whatever steps we can.
Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry says fabric masks can be effective in keeping cough droplets at bay, and she's not opposed to people wearing them. But for the average healthy person, what is not proven is that they provide you any protection. As for disposable masks, the supply of medical masks and respirators is tenuous, and it needs to be reserved for our healthcare workers. The province is asking those who have medical masks to consider donating them instead. Mickey Cowan, CBC News, Vancouver.
A new study in Italy suggests there could be many more cases of COVID-19 than the official numbers have indicated. The researchers have been looking at figures from the Harghita province of Bergamo. They concluded there are likely 4,500 deaths there, more than double the official tally of just over 2,000. Local mayors say people have been dying at home and in care facilities for seniors, and those deaths haven't been included in the official numbers. That's the CBC News from Vancouver. We'll have more news on CBC Radio 1 in half an hour. For news anytime, go to our website, cbc.ca/BC.
I'm Carolina DeRight with your weather update. Chance of light snow for Prince George to the central interior out to the Lakes District with a high of -5 degrees. Mainly cloudy in the east and across the far north, a high of -11 with very cold wind, a risk of frostbite. Becoming a mix of sun and cloud for Terrace and the coastal inland with a high of 3 degrees. Near the water, sun with wind, a high of 6, and in the Bella Coola Valley, chance of flurries or rain showers late this afternoon, a high of 6 degrees. You're listening to CBC Radio 1.
Good morning, I'm Matt Galloway. You're listening to The Current. Still to come, Have you subscribed to a bunch of streaming services now that you're stuck inside 4 days on end? What should you watch on those services? Tom Power will be here with more on that coming up. But first, quarantine cooking with Samin Nosrat. Our cookbook, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, is a staple in many kitchens, including mine. Samin Nosrat has developed a devoted following with your hit Netflix series and now podcast to help us with pantry cooking during a pandemic. The podcast is called Home Cooking. Samin Nosrat joins me now from her home in Oakland, California. Samin, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing in the middle of this wild situation that we all find ourselves in?
I feel strangely fine, to be totally honest. I've had a hard few years, just like incredibly demanding. So it's been really nice to just be home.
Even if you're forced to be home.
I have a big garden, and I feel really lucky to live in the situation where I live. So I'm trying to sort of share my pleasure and joy with others right now.
You're doing this, I would think that sales of the cookbook would go through the ceiling because people have time to cook and they need some direction. But this podcast arrives at a perfect time, and it's a ton of fun as well. Where did the idea for it come from?
Thank you. Well, my friend and collaborator